Hey guys, Filthy Robot here, bringing you another guides, tips, and tricks video. This time we're talking about Civilization 6, early game barbarians, and early game unit management. So let's dive right into it. My basic thought process is this. You guys are going to be starting this game for the first time. You're going to be encountering a lot of new systems and a lot of changes from Civilization 5, and I want to make you guys as prepared as possible for this, for that content. Hopefully we can do this relatively quickly. This should probably only be about 10-12 minute guide video. And we're just talking about some very basics in terms of combat, barbarians, and early game unit selections. So here we are on the map. You guys can see two slingers, which are early game ranged unit. You can see my scout, which is my early game recon unit, and you can see my warrior, early game melee unit, enemy slinger, barbarian slinger, and a barbarian warrior. You can also see these red dotted hexagons over here, red dashed hexagons, I guess, with the exclamation point. These represent zone of control, and we're going to talk about how zone of control works in just a second. First things first, slingers, which are a ranged unit. Ranged units do not exert zone of control. So this slinger doesn't impact my movement at all. I can move to there. I moved right past the slinger. He had no control over my movement because he is a ranged unit and doesn't exert zone of control. How zone of control works is like this. I'll show you. So if I just take a basic slinger, he's got 2 movement. I can move him twice and nothing occurs because I don't have any restrictions on that. However, if I move this slinger towards this barbarian, who also has 2 movement, my slinger also has 2 movement, I can't now move away. Even though I have 1 movement point left, it's not going to let me move away. And that is because I've entered the barbarian's zone of control. Once I enter a unit's zone of control, you are stuck in that zone of control. However, you don't lose all of your action points. You can still act, so you can still attack if that is a attack you're allowed to make. And in this case, we can. The slinger moved into the barbarian zone of control. He can still attack, and now he has killed the barbarian using his action. Okay, so that's the first thing, zone of control. Very different than Civilization 5 zone of control, but very simple in this game. So it's very easy to understand the zone of control in this game. There are some units that either don't exert zone of control, like ranged units, or are immune to zone of control. Some of the horse units in this game, they come in 2 classes, light and heavy cavalry, are immune to... one of them has a immunity to zone of control, and I can't remember if it's both of them or one of them right now, but be aware that in general, horse units are going to be less susceptible to zone of control style mechanics, so you may have to be worried about that. All right, there's also some overall movement changes based on the terrain in Civilization 6 compared to Civilization 5, and I can demonstrate that with this builder. Terrain has a cost associated with it. Flat terrain has 1 movement point cost associated with it. Rough terrain in the form of hills or in the form of forests has 2 movement costs associated with it. And extra rough terrain, that is hills with a forest or hills with a jungle, have 3 movement costs associated with them. In Civilization 5, you didn't really care what the cost of a tile was when you're using your second action point. In Civilization 6, you do. Let me demonstrate what I'm talking about with that. So the builder has 2 movements. I could move into that tile right now. It's a 2 movement thing. I could do that. That would use all my movement points. I can't, however, take 1 step on a flat terrain, which costs me 1 movement point, and then move into a 2 movement point tile. It just doesn't let me do it because I don't have enough movement points to enter that tile. How this works in general, though, so some units, like the warrior, only have 2 total movement points. How do they ever enter a terrain that has 3 costs to it? They need to start adjacent to it. So you can enter a terrain. If you have all of your movement left, you can always enter a terrain tile. But if you have partial movement left, you can't enter terrain tile that has a higher cost than your total remaining movement points. Additionally, rivers take movement points to cross. It takes 3 movement points to cross a river. For most units, that's going to be all of their movement points because most units have either 2 or 3 movement points. But some of the horse units have more than that. So some horse units could start not adjacent to a river, move adjacent to the river, and still cross it with their movement points because they have more movement points than 3. Attacking into a tile counts. So not for ranged units. Ranged units have no cost associated into attacking into a tile, but a melee unit has to take into account the cost of the tile that he's trying to attack into. So if this slinger were on this rough terrain over here, which takes 2 movement points, and my warrior was starting on this tile, then warrior could move 1 tile closer to the slinger, but he then could not attack that slinger even though he has a movement point left because it would have taken me 2 movement points to enter the terrain to attack him. So it makes melee a little bit worse. It makes horse units a little bit better compared to melee units, and it makes ranged units quite a bit better because there are now higher costs associated with numbers of tiles. Okay, done zone of control, done the tile costs, let's talk about barbs in general. Barbs are nastier. They're much nastier than they were in Civilization 5. You have to pay attention to barbarians in ways you didn't in Civilization 5. Barbs are going to also scale a little bit more aggressively based on the difficulty level, is my understanding of this. So you will, especially on higher difficulties, really have to pay attention to barbarians. These are barb encampments. Barb encampments produce barbarians. Barb encampments won't spawn on tiles that you have sight on. So if I clear this camp out and I leave the slinger here afterwards, a barbarian camp could never spawn on this tile again because I have sight on it. It also the barbs also cannot spawn on tiles that city-states have sight on, or that either human players or computer players have sight on either. When barbs spawn, you will get an audio notification, not of the barb spawning, but of the camp spawning, and it will. So you'll get an audio notification. You'll have to get used to listening for that audio notification, and it will appear visually on your grayed out fog terrain over here. So let's say a barb camp were to spawn on this tile. I would now see the double circle of the barb encampment, the 2 rings of fortification of the barb encampment. I'd see it right there, although I would not see the unit in it, and I wouldn't be notified when more units are spawning. I just would know there's a camp there. And if that camp gets cleared, it will also disappear off the map. So if, for example, Preslav over here came and killed that barbarian camp, I would see that disappear off the mini-map. Or not, this isn't the mini-map, off the map from that. Barbarians produce, in the early game, they produce a lot of scouts. Scouts are... Well, you can see the scout icon. This is the scout icon. Barbarians look like this, except they're the red and black of barbarians as opposed to the colors of my civilization. Barbarian scouts will not pillage your tiles. They will not steal your builders. They will not steal your settlers, even if they have the opportunity to do so. And if they're standing on your tiles, they do not prevent you from working those tiles. So if he's standing on one of my tiles over here, like this tile, I wouldn't lose the yield of the salt with the barbarian scout standing on it. So in general, they don't have a lot of impact on being inside your territory. They're not gonna steal your stuff, not gonna pillage your stuff. They can accidentally pillage traders. Traders are the new caravans of Civilization 6, and they will pillage your trade routes. If you're sending a trade route and they happen to stand in the path of that trade route, they will pillage that trade route, even the barbarian scouts. But in general, the scouts aren't doing a lot of damage in your land because they can't do that. They can't do damage to your land. What scouts do is when they move into a tile that is adjacent to one of your districts, they can then return. They get basically information on your city, and they return back to the barbarian camp, and the barbarian camp will spawn additional barbarians that it wasn't going to spawn already, because it already spawns barbarians from time to time. But if a scout returns to a barbarian camp, it triggers that camp to spawn additional barbarians that are going to go then leave the camp and come attack your city. So the downside of ignoring barbarian scouts is they will increase the number of barbarians that are attacking you. There may be some strategies where you want that. For example, if you have faith from kills and you're deliberately trying to farm barbarians for extra faith, but in general, you're probably not going to want additional barbarians to spawn into your lands and come attack you. So you may want to consider preventing scouts from obtaining their objectives. All right. Secondly, barbs are nastier. So we've already kind of said this. You're going to want more units in the early game to deal with that. But there's even extra nasty barbs that will spawn if barbarian encampment is created in a certain range of horses. I don't know what that range is. I don't know that anyone knows that quite yet, minus the devs, of course. It seems to be around 5 or 6. It can be at least 5 or 6 around away from a horse and still be doing this, but it might be slightly more, slightly less than that. And barbarian horse camps are really, really nasty because basic camps spawn things like slingers, archers, spearmen, warriors, stuff like that. The camps near near horses are going to spawn horse archers and horsemen, and those are a lot nastier, a lot faster, and a lot harder to control than non-horse camps. So in addition to the extra units you're already building, if you're dealing with barbarians in the early game of this game as opposed to something like Civilization 5, if you do have a camp with barbarian horsemen, you want even more additional units to deal with that because they're quite nasty. And your early game units may not be strong enough as just 1s or 2s to deal with that because you can't get away from barbarian horsemen. They're too fast at movement speed 4. They're too fast to get away from, so they can run you down and kill your units. So be aware of that. The second to last thing I want to talk about is promotions. So let's dive into that. When your unit has an icon like this, it means you have a promotion available. Promotions can be assigned when you assign a promotion, it ends your turn. A promotion is going to give you both a combat promotion and an instant heal. If you're fans of Civilization 5, you know that you used to have to choose between an instant heal or a promotion. You can get both on promotions in Civilization 6, but it does take all of your remaining actions for the turn, and you can't assign a promotion after you've made an attack. So I couldn't, for example, attack this slinger, then promote my scout. I have to do it in the other order. And if I move, if I do it just in place, if I just click promote here, in place, I do get the heal. I believe the heal is up to 50 for that. And now my scout is done. He can't move this turn. He's all out of actions. However, there are other ways to assign promotions. You could move, this slinger also has a promotion available. You could move one tile and then assign a promotion. Or if I was the scout, I could have moved 2 tiles and then assigned a promotion. And it would still end my turn, but I get a little bit more movement that way than I would otherwise. Anything else from that I want to talk about? Yes, you don't gain additional experience for holding promotions. So this unit also has a promotion. And I can move here and attack for my turn. And I see how I don't gain any experience for making that attack. I don't gain any experience because I have an existing waiting promotion. And until I assign that promotion, the unit will not gain any more experience. Which means that you have to now make the decision of, let's say you're in the middle of combat. There's a bunch of barbarians. You really need to make your attacks this turn. You can't afford to take that turn to assign that promotion and not get an attack off. Okay, but the downside is you're now losing experience by doing that. Additionally, there seems to be a boost in experience, and I'm not exactly sure how this works, but early units on before level 1, so when their basic starting level, before they've got their first promotion, so I guess that probably is level 1, maybe before level 2, I guess is the way to say that. They seem to get more experience compared to units that have already got promoted, at least versus Barbarians. So Barbarians will get you from level 1 to level 2 very quickly, but they won't get you from level 2 to level 3 very quickly, and they won't get you from level 3 to level 4 very quickly. They'll in fact, make that very, very slow. So your early game attacks versus Barbarians are going to give more experience than the first couple attacks for each unit versus Barbarians are going to give more than the later ones. All right, finally, I want to talk just a little bit about the early game units that you have available to you. Slingers can be built immediately. You don't have to get any techs. Same with warriors. It requires archery to get archers, which are the slinger improvement. Archers now have 2 range as opposed to 1 of the slingers. And your first melee upgrade, and it's not actually a melee yet, although this might be fixed by the time you guys see this video, is a spearman unit, which is attacks melee but is classified as a different type, so it's available at bronze working. In general, there's some very easy boosts. The boost to archery is from killing 1 unit with a slinger. The boost for bronze working is for killing 3 barbarians. It funnels you very nicely into quick military units to deal with barbarians if you need it, just by taking actions you're probably taking anyways. And archers seem to be pretty effective for dealing with barbarians for the same reasons that other ranged units in general are going to be pretty effective with this. So those are kind of the early game units you're going to see available for you. I don't recommend investing too heavily in warriors versus barbarians. They're just not very effective compared to ranged units. Really, ranged units are the way to go, with maybe 1 or 2 blocker units to help deal with that. Scouts are not much in the way of combat. They're very, very fragile in this game, so just be aware of that. When you're fighting barbarians, scouts are very, very squishy and are prone to dying on you. All right, I think that about covers it. We went over zone of control, how barbarian mechanics work. We talked about barbarian horse mechanics. We talked about tile costs for moving units around, and we talked about the early game units that are available to you to choose from. And hopefully this was helpful for you guys. Hope you're enjoying Civilization 6, and if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button, and hopefully I will see you guys on the channel. Thanks for watching. Filthy out. See you soon.